I am Jim Collison, and we are live from the Gallup campus here in Omaha, Nebraska, and this is Gallup's Call to Coach with special guest Shane Lopez, recorded on November 1st, 2013. Call to Coach is a resource for those who want to help others discover and use their strengths. We have Gallup experts and independent strengths coaches share tactics, insights, and strategies to help coaches maximize the talent of individuals, teams, and organizations around the world. If you have questions, comments, or contributions for the show today, we do have a live chat room available. It's actually right below the video window. If you're listening to the recorded version, you can email them to us at coaching@gallup.com, or during the live show, just drop those right in chat. We'd love to get those to you as we can for the show. Don't forget to get all your coaching resources as well at the Gallup Strength Center. That's just gallupstrengthcenter.com. And you can also catch the video, both streaming and downloadable audio, available for offline listening after the show. Again, that's all available at coaching.gallup.com. Jeremy Petrosini is our host today. Jeremy works as a learning and development consultant with Gallup here on the riverfront. And Jeremy, great again to see you today. Welcome to Call to Coach.
Thanks, Jim. Yeah, as always, man, it's great to be here, and I am really excited, you guys, for our guest today. Many of you, obviously, even in the pre-chat, know a little bit about Dr. Lopez and some of his research. And again, part of this call, if this is the first time you're listening in or watching the view, we've continued to interview external coaches and some internal Gallup practice experts like we have today, really just on what it means to be a coach. The Gallup Strength Finder, the Clifton Strength Finder assessment, has now reached just under 9.5 million people. And I know Dr. Clifton, when it first was invented, just sort of thought, man, wouldn't it be great if we hit 1 million at some point? You know, now we're approaching 10 million. And so part of our vision to any of you out there who have discovered the Clifton Strength Finder, the power that it's been in your role as a coach, some of you even as managers, leaders, it's our vision that if we really want to reach 1 billion people to discover their strengths, that we need about 1 million coaches to help us do that. And so that's part of the goal of these calls, is to just help empower each of you out there. Again, I'm excited today for Dr. Lopez to share part of his strengths journey, and not only how he's used it, but how he's helped develop this and really take it to education and beyond. So, Shane, let me give just a quick couple nuggets of background, and then I'd love for you to jump in with just telling us about your strength journey. But Dr. Lopez is author of a book called Making Hope Happen, and is really the world's leading researcher on the topic of hope. And so there's a lot of great insight out there of what that means, what it means to people throughout all aspects of their life, but specifically even in education. Shane's been able to actually partner with Gallup as a senior scientist and the chief architect for our poll. And the student poll is free to schools around the country. We'd love at some point to see it again around the globe, but right now in the country we know that there's been over 1 million students that have participated and been able to measure really their levels of strength, engagement, well-being, and hope. And so, Shane, I'm going to turn it over to you to tell us a little bit more about just your journey. Obviously, you can kind of, with hope and what you've done, you could go anywhere, do anything. But tying and linking yourself to Gallup and the Clifton Strength Finder has been a key passion for you. So tell us a little bit about your journey on being called to coach.
Well, Jeremy, Jim, thanks so much for having me here today, and thanks to you all for the great work you do spreading the good news about Strengths Finder and how it can develop people. 14 years ago, I think this month, I'd have to check the calendar, but I went to Lincoln, Nebraska, from Lawrence, Kansas, drove up to Lincoln, and we had a 100-person meeting. It was a positive psychology meeting studying the good life. I was a junior scientist at the time, so I sat toward the back of the room, sat next to this wonderful man, and we visited off and on throughout the meeting for the morning session. And then at the break, he said, hey, I'm Don, what do you do? I said, I'm Shane, I study hope. I said, Don, what do you study? He said, I study strengths. And then he said something like, maybe we should do something together sometime. I'm like, okay. And little did I know that was Don Clifton, and he had invented this thing called the Strengths Finder that was slowly gaining popularity at that time. And I've been fascinated about it ever since. And what I learned early on, and what Don convinced me early on, is that the more you do what you do best, the more hopeful you are. And that's what tied our work together.
Yeah, that's great. Shane, talk a little bit about just kind of this model too. So obviously hope is something you're passionate about, but talk about how strengths, you know, the word that I've used as I talk about it and have read your research and integrated it again, with our clients, not just education, but any organization or leader we talk to, that strengths really kind of acts as a key driver, to hope and engagement. Talk a little bit about that, just so people kind of gain some of that kind of theory and thinking behind it.
Yeah, what I tried to do over the last few years is connect the dots between all the polling work we do around the world and the strengths work we do around the world. And what I found is that we just know a lot about what drives people. We understand the motivating forces and the reasons why people do what they do. And some of this data comes from the World Poll, some comes from the Gallup Nightly Poll in America, and some from the Gallup Student Poll, which I hope to have a chance to say more about later. But what I found is that there are two things. When we ask people, what are your hopes and dreams for the future, there are two things that most people talk about. Two things. They want a good job and they want a happy family. A good job and a happy family. They want a meaningful way to spend their time and talents, and they want good people to spend those time and talents with. So I realized that most people are aiming their lives at these two things. And then when they can do more of what they do best, it really helps them get to the good job and the happy family. But when we'd go around the country talking about this, especially with institutions of higher ed, so colleges and universities, but then preschools and businesses, folks would say, okay, all I have to do is get someone to take StrengthsFinder, and then they'll be more likely to find the good job and build the happy family. And we're like, no, it's not that easy. It's not that easy. You've got to take... It's not a quick fix. It's a lot of hard work. You've got to take StrengthsFinder. You've got to figure out how you use that top 5 information to do more of what you do best every day. And if you do that, and if you do that well, diligently, intentionally, you then become more hopeful. You believe that the future will be better than the present. You believe that you have the power to make it so. You become more engaged, and that involvement and enthusiasm builds over time. And if those two dominoes fall, you ultimately get to the good job and the happy family.
Right.
And that goes through academic success, workplace success, and personal happiness. So in the model that I have up there, it's really it's a set of dominoes, and it best starts with knowing what you do best and doing more of it.
Yeah, no, that's great. And talk a little bit about, too, obviously many of the listeners on, we had close to 1,000 reply today to say they wanted to listen live. We know we'll have more that kind of download later, but part of where they're coming from is that role of coach, right? So sitting in and advising somebody one-on-one. I know you're somebody who not only is a thought leader behind the role of strengths and hope and engagement and education and beyond, but I know you also play that role of kind of practitioner, where you purposefully find yourself sitting with people individually talking about this. So share with us kind of some tips or techniques that you use when you're having these one-on-one conversations with people.
Well, the most important thing I ever learned about coaching and psychotherapy and change is that there are some common factors that are kind of baked into why all this happens. One thing is you have to really understand the person you're sitting across from and talking to. So you really have to understand who they are, and strengths is just a wonderful way of getting to the heart of that. The second is you have to have a really strong relationship with that person. So over time, I've tried to do my best to really move that relationship forward and make it emotionally charged in a way that is different from many other friendships people have in the world. And then the kicker, the place where hope comes in, is no change happens if someone doesn't believe that the future can be better than it currently is, than the present. So you don't wake up in the morning and say, this is going to be a crappy day. Let's see what I can do to make my life better. You wake up and you say, there's a lot of potential here. What can I do to really capitalize on it? So what I've tried to do over time, and I learned this from one of my first long-term clients, Jeremy, about 20 years ago. His name was Rodney. He wanted to become a hotel executive, and he was doing all the right stuff. He was going to Cornell, where they have this huge hotel management program, tops in the country. He knew what to do in terms of the rational things, but he didn't know how to play to his strengths. I remember 20 years ago, I was thinking, gosh, he's got a lot of intellect, he's got a lot of drive, but he doesn't know how to do what he does best, and I didn't have the words for it then, but he was a people soother. He could solve problems. He could meet with you and make you feel as though everything has worked out just right. So the first thing I learned 20 years ago was that once I had the relationship, once I had the hope built, I really needed that extra thing, and that's where strengths came in. So from that point forward, I've just been trying to help people do more of what they do best, and I know that that sounds simple, but really the best technique I have is using your strengths in a novel way 5 days in a row. So take futuristic. So I'm futuristic maximizer. So futuristic, I would try to use futuristic in a new and different way 5 days in a row. So if I use it well at work, I might use it more in my family. If I use it a lot in my family, I might use it more in my investments. If I use it a lot there, I might use it more in my friendships. So I try to take it to a new and different domain. And when I've tried that with people, they've really resonated with it.
Yeah, that whole integration, right? And I know you thrive a lot with not just talking about hope and engagement for the sake of what it means in the moment, but obviously that future component of an individual's overall well-being. And obviously Gallup's written a lot on that. Talk a little bit about the measurement and even how we integrate well-being into that piece with schools, because I want people to hear too how you talk about job and career. I know a lot of our coaches out there have that happen with people, but obviously education for individuals around the world is a core component toward where we land with jobs. So talk about that kind of integrated life piece where well-being comes into play as well with students.
Well, it's interesting. So with the Gallup student poll, we have reached out to over 1 million people before this month, but this month alone, we've surveyed about 700,000 folks.
Wow.
So it's really growing quite quickly. And what we've learned by looking at that data and working closely with schools is that surprisingly to many people, well-being, happiness leads to success instead of success leading to happiness. I was talking to Sean Acor this week, and we were talking about that being the central finding of his first book, The Happiness Advantage. And we found that again and again in our data. So if you can get to well-being, you're more likely to get to success. If you get to success, you're not necessarily more likely to get to happiness. So we have to figure out ways to teach that to folks, and I do think it goes back to strengths. So the more you do what you do best, the better chance you are of being hopeful and engaged. Therefore, the more likely you are to be happy. And then really success is the fourth, the fifth, the sixth domino instead of the first domino to fall. So it all goes back to strengths, but goes through well-being to ultimately get to that place where you have a good job that you're successful at, or a good report card to show your parents.
Yeah, and talk about that a little bit more, because this was a stat that when I read it, I wish I had it when I was a kid, because we talk about the fact that hope is a better predictor to future success than GPA.
Yeah.
So if I could have defended my low GPA to my mom to say, but I'm really hopeful.
Right.
That might have felt good. But talk about that, because I think sometimes people think what we're saying is you have to have academic success to be successful. And obviously there's been entrepreneurs who drop out of school, 5th grade and start, Fortune 1000 companies. But talk a little bit about, again, what we're trying to get to the heart of here, that again can predict academic success, but more about the whole person and who they are and playing to their strengths in school and in their future career.
Sure, and that's where I do want to start, is that ideally it starts with you knowing what you do best. And as a result of doing a lot of what you do best, you become more hopeful. As a more hopeful person, you have a better shot at doing well in school and work than a less hopeful person does. We've created all these studies where we do horse races. We compare hope's effect to GPA's effect on your long-term success. We compare hope's effect to high school GPA's effect to long-term success, and hope wins every time. So your belief that the future will be better than the present, combined with your belief that you have some role in making it so, that sense of agency, that goes up as a result of doing what you do best, and it helps you get to where you want to be in terms of getting the degree in service of a good job. And I want to emphasize that part too. If there are any educators on the line, we've kind of duped ourselves into thinking students are coming to college to get a degree. No, students are coming to college to get a good job.
Yeah.
They're coming to college to get a good job. The degree is just something they have to do in service of that job pursuit. So yeah, the last study that really blew me away, a friend of mine, Kevin Rand, did this study looking at hope as related to LSAT in predicting first-year ranking in law school. So LSAT's a law school admissions test. You would think, oh, that tells the whole story about ranking. In fact, hope was a better predictor of student ranking at the end of the first year than the test they took to get into law school. So hope is a strong force in academics, but also in the workplace.
Yeah. No, that's and the insight again, I think where there's so many ahas there. I'm reminded of a comment my 13-year-old son Joseph, kind of a discovery he made a couple years ago. He said, "Dad, I realize the only reason you go to school is to get a good job. So if I can just invent something now," I think he was 12 at the time, I could surpass all of that, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So I'm like, go for it, buddy. But school's still critical, obviously in that piece. But yeah, the piece you're saying again is hope and that component. And I think this is what I want you to unpack a little bit more.
Yeah.
But you mentioned that discovery, and obviously as early of an age it can happen, the better, of what you do best. Or Don Clifton would always say, what you do better than anybody else in the world. Mm-hmm. If you can discover that, I think that's where the Clifton Strength Finder comes in, right? I mean, that's the piece that, again, so many people on the line who are coaches, it's not the be-all, end-all of here's the job you should now have, here's, this magical pill, again, of these are your strengths, go do them. But it's a lens into helping people figure out what is it that you do better than anybody else. So talk about, again, you, with your academic status, with what you've done, you could partner with Myers-Briggs or anybody else out there in the world. Mm-hmm. You've chosen, again, more to align yourself with Clifton Strength Finder. But talk a little bit about, again, the power of that tool and using it for people to discover their strengths, specifically when you're chatting with them around job or career.
Yeah, and I'm going to fast forward to the end of that story, and what I'm doing right now, I'm studying people who love their jobs. So 33% of people are engaged in their jobs, 30% of people are engaged in their jobs, 33% have career well-being at a thriving level, 18% have both. So 18% of people like their jobs. 1% of employed workers in America, employed people in America, love their jobs. And all of them do what they do best every day. So they're using their strengths every day, all day. So how do we prepare people, starting with your son at 13 or my son at 8, or even the kids in the Clifton Child Development Center a few hundred yards from where you sit? How do we identify strengths early on and then encourage them to do what they do best? And I learned that from Mary Reckmeyer at the Child Development Center, from Don Clifton, from other folks. And here's a term that I like. You have to indulge them in opportunities to do what they do best. So we think about, like, Halloween last night, how much did we all indulge our children last night? Well, what if we had that same approach to every day and indulging our children in opportunities to do what they do best? And another thing that Cheryl Beamer taught me as my coach, my Gallup coach, strengths coach, she said you have to help people sort to the very best opportunities that would allow them to do what they do best. So Jeremy, you might have 30 opportunities today to use futuristic. And how do you sort down to the 2 that you should even consider, and then the 1? So when I talk to middle schoolers about strengths, I often reference Harry Potter and the sorting hat. It's like, hey, this will help you sort to the opportunities you should be taking advantage of, to the people that you need to hang out with to develop more. And it really is, it's incredibly powerful. My son is 8. He has presence. So these are kid strengths, which are a little different from the 34 that we're all familiar with. But he has presence, competition, and confidence. So what do I need to do? I need to get that kid in front of people all the time, and let him use whatever musical talent he has or acting talent he has to really experience those strengths at their peak of power. And that's what I do. I try to indulge him in those opportunities as much as I can. And I think that's what we need to help our clients do. So in thinking about the thousands of people I worked with around their strengths over the years, whether it's in middle school, high school, college, or in the workplace, the one thing I try to get them to learn how to do is to use their strengths, their top 5, as a sorting tool. How do you look at the world and say, these things are not A+ opportunities for me? These are, and now let me use my top 5, or maybe even my top strength, my top 1, and figure out how to do just those things today.
Mm.
And that really opens up the minds and hearts of college students. I can tell you, it really shines at that level of development because they're overwhelmed with choice and opportunity if they're at a decent school. So when you say you only have to do those things that really bring you to life, because you're being more futuristic, you're being more of who you are, you're using that top strength. It's a tremendous relief and an energizing force for these students. So I believe if we're able to do that with more students and actually teach people how to do it, teach teachers and counselors how to do it. So the coaches on the line, if you could seek out a teacher or a counselor who needs this kind of skill set, teach them how to do it for the 150 students they see every day. Boy, we can make a big impact.
Yeah. And let me ask you this too, Shane, and then Jim, if you've got questions from the chat, you can interrupt here in a second. We'll hit on some of those, Shane, and then open it up to some of the listeners. So what is your advice then to, I mean, you just kind of give a challenge to those of us listening and those of us who play the role of coaches, as we're specifically coaching parents, teachers, and managers, right? Because we even just launched some recent data about the role that managers play. They're kind of like your local mom and dad of, are they making your life better or worse, right?
Yeah.
And that sense of inspiration that you just talked about, I had the chance to speak at TEDx Omaha, where I know you spoke a few years back, and but just echoed that message, that the role we play as managers. But what's that advice you would give to coaches, again, as we're coaching parents, teachers, managers, about how we can inspire or how we can help people, do your words of what makes them come alive?
Yeah. Number one, I have to say, and this is something we have to all be careful about, people will take advice from us only if they have a strong relationship with us.
Yeah.
So you have to build that trusting, emotionally charged relationship with people too, and you'll learn over your lifetime of coaching that your best change comes from out of those relationships that are really strong in that way. But the next step, as you know, Jeremy, we've got managers, teachers, principals, parents who don't know what they do best. And they can't help someone else do it unless they have experienced it, unless they have really felt the difference between swimming upstream and swimming downstream. Doing what you do best and not doing what you do best, really, it determines how much energy you have in the day. It determines how happy you are, how productive you are. So the first challenge is really find someone who has some leadership talent around you, who's an educator, a parent, a social entrepreneur of some sort, who has some leadership talent. Introduce them to strengths and coach that person. And then that person can then create those ripples throughout the community. So I think we need to gravitate to the teachers who are talented, the principals who are talented, the managers who are talented, invest heavily in them, imagining that they're going to create ripples out there in the people that they lead.
Yeah, no, that's well said. And I know you mentioned, the Strength Explorer tool, kind of designed, for kids, and where they get a top 3 instead of a top 5, and
right.
Even the guide that comes with that to parents. I know for my son, like yours, he has competing in his top 3, but also achieving, and then that discoverer piece. So his whole, if I could just invent something, it really does let me as a parent say, how do I speak into that? And then I love your thoughts too but we first need to discover who we are.
Yeah.
And it's been interesting. My 10-year-old daughter even said, "Hey, Dad, I know you're only hard on me because that's your maximizer." So I'm like, I'm glad she sees it as that. Yeah, justifies it a little bit. But your insight there for parents, teachers, again, thinking about how do we discover that in ourselves, and then untap those individuals. So Jim, I'm going to turn it over to you, and then if there's time too, Shane, we can talk a little bit about, obviously the new research we're doing around Entrepreneurship Finder, where there are those people you talk about creating ripples. But obviously our discovery is to say, how do we tap into even students with entrepreneurial talent that will someday be those ripple creators, help them discover that at a young age. But Jim, what are we kind of hearing, out there? What key questions do people have for Shane?
Yeah, so Kiwi Karen asked this question. She says to Shane, is there any research done on the effects of trauma in engagement with people's strengths and hope?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, we've done a lot of research looking at test-retest of StrengthsFinder results, and I have to say, I'll give you my bias. I don't know why people take it more than once. Don told me years ago, he said, you could spend your whole lifetime developing your top strength and not really working on any of the others. And I know we like to get into theme dynamics and figure all that out, but I primarily develop futuristic. But people do ask us often, do strengths change, especially given experiencing trauma? And we haven't been able to really determine that for sure. What we do find, because it would take a natural experiment where you would know people and they would have a certain top 5, they'd all go through a similar traumatic experience, and then you'd retest them after the traumatic experience. So let's say like a hurricane or something like that. So ultimately we might do that study down the road, but for now what we do see is that when folks kind of emerge on the other side of trauma, their personality has changed a little bit. So they may be emphasizing certain aspects of what they do best on the Strengths Finder, and you might see some resorting of strengths, but we still believe that even when you experience something like that, the second time you take it, 3 of those 5 that you had the first time around will be in the top 5 again. So you may get some resorting, but for the most part, you're going to have a similar profile. Now, again, there are people out there, maybe even on the call, that have taken it a dozen times. Why you do that, I don't know. I asked one person this at one of our clients, one of our best strengths clients. I said, Susan, why have you taken it, umpteen times? She said, I want the smart strength. I said, whoa, I didn't know we had a smart strength. Well, I dug into this, and she had positivity and woo that was working brilliantly in her career. She was in her late 20s, and she was an assistant vice president for this company. So she was doing okay. She said, I want the smart strength. I said, oh, well, who has the smart strength? And she was referring to analytical. She said, well, my boss. I said, well, he already has the smart strength. You don't need to have it. He needs you to have positivity and woo, and that's why you're on his team. And I can tell you, you make him look smart with your positivity and woo. And after a day, because we were in this meeting and we were able to interact 10 times and just little moments, after a day, I feel like that was one of my crowning coaching achievements of this year, is that I convinced her that her positivity and woo made her boss look smart, and she didn't need to be something she wasn't because she thought that thing was the smart strength and hers weren't.
Yeah, Shane, I love that insight, and again, with the opportunity that I have to be one of our facilitators and leaders of these external certification classes that we're now doing. Again, that's kind of a new strategy for us this year, is to train external coaches. But it's interesting when I even ask that group, hey, when you think of the 34 themes, which ones are the best? They'll always come up with a short list, right? And then you go, which ones are they? And both lists are there, but one of the key components that we try to drive through to them, and you did for this gal, which is brilliant, is themes are neutral, right? They're all meant to be positive. They're all meant to be great. They're called themes that lead to strength for a reason. Is they can all be something that helps us win. And like you said, for this gal, leveraging who she is what's made her smart, what's made her great. And I think for our coaches to grasp that, again, that's one of the core components of those teaching or the toolkits that we now have, the strength coaching kit for people who are managers. It's all about helping people discover that value in what they bring. So, absolutely. Jim, what other questions are out there?
Yeah, a lot of questions about the actual tools and assessment. We brought them up. So, Shane, let me throw that to you. We talked about the different ages. So, who takes what and when, and what do you recommend? And then maybe throw in the idea of which one of those is best if you're job hunting, maybe college or post-college, looking for a job.
Sure. So my first job with Gallup was to lead the organization of the CliftonStrengths Finder technical report. So that was my foot in the door project in my work with Gallup. So of course that's for folks 15 years and older who have kind of the expected reading level at grade 9, because it's written really at about a 5th to 6th grade reading level, but you don't want to tax people too much. Strengths Explorer, Clifton used Strengths Explorers for folks 10 to 14, but if you have a good sound reading level, if you have a good reader, that child who's 8, 9 could probably take it just fine. And of course, with both these measures, if you have folks with any kind of profound disability and they need the timer turned off, our folks can help you do that. But then beyond that, and this is something new and exciting, and I don't know if Jim and Jeremy know about this, we're working on a technique, we're building a technique through which you could spot the strengths of younger kids. So we're working on a strength spotting tool, we're developing that right now, that would allow you to see the top 10 strengths that kids have across a classroom, or across a Little League team, or across a Girl Scout troop, and kind of zero in with the help of this training tool we're working on the top 1, 2, or 3 strengths that a child may have as young as 6 years old, as young as 3 years old. So we, again, are doing that just so that parents and coaches and leaders can indulge children in opportunities to do more of what they do best. If you're job hunting, absolutely, you're going to use StrengthsFinder. And what I want you to know from this research we're doing around people who love their jobs, here's what you want to do. You want to find a place that cares about your well-being. You want to find a place that allows you to do what you do best every day. You want to land that job and then job craft it from a job you like into one you love. And if it's not perfect for you, you go boss shopping. You go find a boss that really gets you and gets your strengths, understands your well-being, and will love on you for a decade, 2 decades to come. So those are the 4 things you need to do to get to a job you love.
Yeah, and that boss piece too, Shane, and you know this from the research and individuals you've connected with, but that piece, again, where we talk about it when we first published First Break All the Rules, is people join an organization, but they leave a manager. You know, in our recent data, even some of the stuff we just published here this last month, really, from a talent perspective, only about 1 in 10 people have manager talent. And so Gallup, again, is committed to helping managers figure out how they pull out the best in people. We just are launching a new high-performance manager course that starts the first of the year, and then that new toolkit that actually just launched this last week, really for managers. So those of you who are coaching managers, that's a great resource for them. But obviously the individuals have to find that boss that's going to value them and pull out the best in them.
Yeah, and I see Gallup over the next few years doing a better job of helping coaches by really describing what a great manager looks like, going beyond the work we've already done, so that a coach can teach a job hunter, hey, these are the 4 signs, these are the 5 signs you look for in a great manager, so you don't happen upon another bad boss by accident.
Yeah, we're actually behind the scenes talking right now about similar to Call to Coach, but a call where we would interview some of the world's best managers on a monthly basis and let them just talk about those practices. But yeah.
Wonderful.
Well said. I know we have more questions we can kind of get to in the post-show. Jim, I'll let you kind of wrap the formal components here.
You bet. Thanks, Jeremy. We'll remind everyone to take full advantage of all the resources we have available at the Gallup Strength Center. Just head out to GallupStrengthsCenter.com and send us your questions or comments. Just send those to us at coaching@gallup.com, and we get back to you right away on those. You can also catch the recorded audio and video of this show, and all the past ones are all available out at coaching.gallup.com. We also have a new Facebook group that we started. You can get the notifications for future shows. That's one of the #1 questions we get all the time is, how do I get alerted when Call to Coach is going to be on? Come out and join our Facebook group. Just go to facebook.com and search Call to Coach. And join that, and we will put you right in there. We're also looking for guest bloggers who can do some writing for us on the coaching blog. If you're interested in submitting a post for consideration, you can then contact us, guess where, coaching@gallup.com, and put guest blogger in the subject line. You can also subscribe to our YouTube channel. So all these are available out there as well. YouTube.com/user/Gallup Strengths will get you all the all the videos that we've done, as well as some dynamite coaching testimonials of coaches who've come out of our training, and we get a few minutes with them. And if you want to know what it's like to go to our training and then come out of it, we've got about 6 testimonials for you out there as well. We want to thank Shane Lopez for joining us today, and we look forward to the next Call to Coach. Jeremy, can you tell us what's coming up next?
Yeah, you bet, Jim. November 15th will be our next Call to Coach call. I mentioned we're kind of on an every 2-week cadence now. That'll continue kind of same time, 1 p.m. Eastern. And the guest we're going to have on, a gal by the name of Kathy Kirsten. And one of the things that Kathy's got a real interesting story where she discovered her strengths, as Shane was talking about, in 2006, I think, was when she first took StrengthsFinder. But then when she joined a large tech company called Rackspace Hosting, she was invited to help embed a strength-based culture within that organization. And she's got some phenomenal stories of things that they've done there, not just to train managers with it, like we've been talking about, but how it became part of ways that they use strength to impact people's families, thinking about well-being on a whole, how they took it into their community. She has now since kind of stepped away from that role. She says kind of moonlighting as a coach while she's raising a couple young kids and hoping to continue to launch her coaching business, but just has some great stories she's going to be able to share about kind of the practical ways for many of you who work within large organizations, ways you can roll that out, but also as an independent coach for those of you out there too who can kind of just gain some insights from her. So we're excited about that. Again, November 15th, we'll have Kathy on the call.
All right. Well, if you are listening live, stay around for the post show. More questions and your comments from chat for Shane. And we want to thank everyone for coming out today. Everyone have a great day. Thanks for coming out.
Thanks, Shane. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Jeremy.
All right. Shane, we got a couple more questions for you
Sure.
from the chat room. Let me pull those up real quick. Let's see. 1 second here.
And I like the way you have the Gallup books in the background there, Jim.
Yeah, you like that?
Right over your right shoulder.
Very strategic.
Now, a lot of folks don't know. Do you remember which Gallup book is on The Office for dozens of episodes?
Oh, I don't know that.
Yeah, first break all the rules.
It is.
Yeah, it's on the credenza in Michael Scott's office. So when you walk into Michael Scott's office, there's a shot of first break all the rules right when you walk in.
Well, he broke some rules. I'm not sure he broke the right rules.
Right.
Hey, Shane, real quick, how do we know? How do we get more information about you? Where are you at? We've got some information on you, but for folks listening,
Sure.
How do folks get in contact with you?
Sure. At HopeMonger is a great way to go on Twitter. So at HopeMonger, just follow me there, and then send me a tweet or go to hopemonger.com and use the Contact Us button there if you want to send a note, or just email me at shane@strengths.org, shane@strengths.org. So those 3 ways to get in touch with me.
So someone asked out there, what strength or theme sources should entrepreneurs use when they're consulting with companies? That's a hard question, isn't it?
Yeah. I'll let Jeremy answer that one.
I'll answer it. It's whatever themes they have, right? So people ask us all the time, what are the best top 5 of a CEO? And we're like, the themes that they have. Like, those are the best top 5. And to figure out what that means, and again, I think, Shane, you probably have examples of this, but when people come in to coach and even get trained as coaches or teachers, there's not a perfect top 5. I think what the answer is, and the same thing that Shane shared earlier, you guys, about students, is help them figure out what they do best. And so I think even as a coach or as an independent consultant, when you're working with entrepreneurs, you need to use your talents. And that's even with this Entrepreneurship Finder tool that we're developing that will be released this next year. It's less about, they have futuristic, strategic, and ideation, but it's more about they've been able to figure out what they do best. And again, you see that with even entrepreneurs like a Steve Jobs, who there's elements he was really good at, and there's elements he would, knowingly, if you've read his biography, it's that sense of there's things he wasn't good at. And I think that's the component. We unpack it a lot in strength-based leadership, saying no one person is well-rounded. We use it, Don used to use the term a lot, that they're like a star and they have points, and one of our coaches on a previous call in Singapore talked about that as well. But I think that whole idea of when you're asking, anytime you're asking what are the best themes to have or the best strengths to have, it's yours. The answer is yours, and find a way to perfect them. So Shane, I don't know if you'd add to that, but
well, and you have to partner with the right people. I mean, you always have to partner with the right people, and referring back to that case I mentioned where Susan had positivity in Woo, and she was working as a assistant vice president. I went to one of her smaller meetings, and it still had 20-something people in it, but there was a dearth of relationship talent in that room. They didn't know how to build relationships with one another or with other people, and that defined the bottleneck that they were experiencing with ideas and workflow. So we talked about how to pull someone like that in. But an entrepreneur has to be keen at building teams. There are no solo entrepreneurs. I mean, we like to think of people who are standing there all by themselves inventing everything, but all of these people are really tapping into the talents of all the people around them. So if they don't lead with futuristic, they go find someone who has futuristic. If they don't have positivity in Woo, they go find positivity in Woo. I would always have to go find people who had discipline and responsibility, because I knew I needed someone on the team that needed to manage projects in a way that I couldn't manage projects. So I would always recruit for that, and I think there are entrepreneurs out there that do exactly the same thing.
Yeah, and we talk about that a lot too, Shane, with when you think about success. And I know a lot of the research we're doing right now are companies that, or entrepreneurs that try to start a company and fail.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times it's that piece, that lack of partnership.
Mm-hmm.
They know even what they do well, but they're thinking this idea is a multi-million-dollar idea, and they don't find the right team initially.
Yeah.
You know, Jim Collins' words of kind of getting the right people on the bus.
Mm-hmm.
For you to even use that example of what are the types of people I need around me based on their strengths that complement mine to be successful.
Yeah, one of our colleagues, Katie Lyon, she has a sister who's a serial entrepreneur, and Katie's sister says basically you just need a good enough idea and then great people around you.
Yeah.
So that's what an entrepreneur does. They have a good enough, unique idea,
Yep.
but then they have superior people around them. They have incredible people around them. And I think if we look at where most products or services start, it's a good enough idea. It's not a perfect idea, but they just have an amazing team of people that bring it to the market in a way that other people can't.
Yeah, no, that's well said. And I think a lot of times too, something we'll share, and this is just something you maybe even heard us talk about from a Gallup perspective. But strengths does not tell you can you do the job, but it's how you do it, right? So it's how you get things done, not can you do it. And I think that's where you'll see, even if you looked at managers, you're going to see a different top 5 across the board, but it's how they get things done, how they manage people. And again, then what you need around you, as Shane, you just said brilliantly. So, Jim, are there other questions?
There is. Before I do that, I do want to thank Jamie Amara and the newly minted award-winning Kurt Liesfeld for being out in the chat room
MVP.
as well. They have done, should we just shout MVP? For being out in the chat room, they have done a fabulous job out there of keeping things going. Shane, I want to ask you a real practical question, some do's and don'ts for new coaches. This is a question we see from time to time, but maybe in your opinion, some do's and don'ts.
I need to reiterate something I shared earlier. So many coaches are eager to help folks, so eager, new coaches, that they don't take the time to build the relationships with the people they're helping. It's like, hey, I've got a lot of tools. I want to share these things with you. I want to help you. I want to change your life forever in the next 5 minutes. Well, first, spend 5 minutes getting to know the person. Spend 5 hours getting to know the person. And that depth of that relationship will provide a springboard for everything else you do. Second is we have to shrink the world of strengths down to small bits for people. We can't overwhelm them with everything we know about strengths. So we need to help people discover these opportunities to do what they do best. We need to help them sort through all the opportunities that they have to engage in the world. And we have to give them these bite-sized chunks to really take on. And third, what are you developing your strengths for? In service of what? I think coaches need to help people get really clear about the end goals that they're pursuing. So being a great manager is not an end goal. It's really raising the profit margin in this way, meeting the needs of my employees in that way, having space and time left for my family at the end of the day. Those might be 3 meaningful goals. But being a great manager is not a real goal. You have to flesh that out a great deal. So I would say spend some time as you get to know the person, really understanding what they want out of life. And a lot of the executives I work with, they want more left at the end of the day to give to their families. So we figure out ways to achieve the same level of productivity, but in less time, so that they can drive home and have a little energy and time left to spend with their families. And then they build up these well springs of reserves that actually make them better executives in the future. So I think we really need to start with the relationship and get that grounded, but also understand the end game. What are you really aiming your life at? No one's aiming their lives at landing a crappy job and being a bad manager, So we really need to understand what's behind what they do every day. Why do they do what they do every day? In service of what? And the better we get to understand that, the more we can make magic out of their strengths.
Awesome. Jeremy, don't we have we're getting some questions about how do I find a good coach? Don't we have some new resources available at the Strength Center?
We do.
Folks do
yeah.
That?
So, on GallupStrengthsCenter.com, there's a link on there that many of our independent coaches who are now being certified. I think we've got 6 or 10 on there who their information's there. Again, we want to service kind of individuals, small, medium-sized organizations. People can always contact us as well at coaching@gallup.com for insights on that. But again, a big part of it, as Shane just talked about, is for self-discovery to be made. Sometimes we need that external component. And again, for those of you who are coaches, again, some of you have been through some of Gallup's training, but one of the big pieces we talk about a lot is it's not as much about the advice you give, but the questions you ask. And establishing trust, as Shane just talked about, is a critical component to that. There's a great resource. We actually have a lot of Gallup's consultants that are new to our firm read, which is a book called Trusted Advisor by a professor at Harvard named David Meister. And again, just talking about the importance of the relationship side, building trust and intimacy, to really make it about them, not about you, so that you can give advice that would kind of land in a way that's meaningful.
We've also got some upcoming iPhone and Android applications coming out. I won't commit to dates because I don't know those exactly yet.
They're submitted, and we're waiting on Apple to give us the launch, at least on the iPhone ones.
To get those approved. And then, Shane, I'm going to put up your slide one more time because we got a lot of requests for that. I'll let folks know that if you're watching the live version of this will be included in the post that we do a week from now. So every Wednesday we post the previous week's Call to Coach. So if you're interested in that slide, I have it up right now. If you're getting your smartphone out and taking pictures of it, don't worry about it. We'll have that up and ready for you. But Shane, any further comments on that slide as well?
Well, there's a maze of arrows there, and to describe that in a little more detail, the arrows represent solid research that demonstrates the directionality of this growth model. So human development unfolds in that direction. But what's interesting is that we're pulled forward by the idea of having a good job and a happy family. So those images of the future, those compelling stories that we tell of the future. So for example, my son, he's 8, his story about his good job changes all the time, but he can tell a great story about what he wants to do in the world of work when he lands on something that interests him. That pulls him forward. Then I indulge him in this doing what you do best idea. So knowing his strengths helps him move towards that idea of having that good job. He can tell a beautiful story about what he wants from a happy family. He's told me the same story since he was 3 years old, and I think it was after meeting a friend of ours, a common friend, Valerie Calderon's family. He said, Dad, I want a dark-haired wife and 4 dark-haired children. I said, really? I said, well, your mom has blonde hair. He goes, does she really? So he's interested in all these family dynamic things ever since he was 3 years old. So having people, and this is what I want coaches to hear, having people tell you these stories of where they want to be in the future with their jobs and where they want to be with their families, that gives you so much good material to build off of over the course of your coaching relationship, because you'll say, Jeremy, didn't you tell me that for the future of your job and your family you wanted these things, and now you're behaving in this way, and it doesn't seem like that's in line with futuristic or with the end point. Mm-hmm. So then you can sort down and edit. That's another brilliant thing that Steve Jobs taught us, and I think as coaches we can really pick up on. How do you edit your life? How do you edit your day? How do you use your strengths and where you want to go in life to edit down to the things you should be doing today?
All right, good stuff, guys. I think we've come up on our time. There's a few more questions, but we could go on forever, probably getting this done, and I think we'll call this a wrap for today. Jeremy, anything else you want to tie this up with?
No, I just, again, would thank you, Shane. I'm sure there'll be other times we need to bring you on just because there's so much great value you have to add. So thanks again for giving up your time and sharing your thoughts and ideas with us.
Well, you bet, and I want everyone to stay tuned for the Gallup student poll results that we'll release in about 3 weeks. It'll tell you what's on the hearts and minds of America's students, and I think it'll be quite surprising once you get a full handle of what students are telling us.
Yeah, and those are the future managers, leaders of tomorrow, right? So it's
and entrepreneurs. You got
knowing
it.
Where they're at. Yep.
Good stuff. All right, we'll call this a wrap for the post show. And this post show was so good, I think I'm going to include it
All
in
right.
everything. It was just so good. So that'll do a wrap for the post show. Remember, if you're still listening live, you can listen to the entire show in its entirety. Maybe you came a little bit late out at coaching.gallup.com. We'll end this for now. Thanks for coming out and listening to us again. Thanks, Shane.
Thank
and
you.
We'll be back in 2 weeks with another Call to Coach. Thanks for listening.